So we're all taught when we're young, first learning the piano, to curve our fingers because they work better that way. But did you know that curling the fingers actually causes tension fundamentally because of the muscles that we are using? And if this is interesting to you, let's go ahead and jump right in. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, we all know that when we play the piano, there are more or less efficient shapes of the hands or the way we use our hands. But what I often find is that most of the time when people try to form this good or sort of natural hand position, they actually curl the fingers too far. And this curling of the fingers actually causes tension. So let's go ahead and think about that in a few different ways. So the first point that we have to think about is that tension is bad. But we want to think about why tension is bad, okay? So tension essentially is muscles moving, okay? Activating a muscle. So if I raise my arm, I have tension in the muscle that is required to raise my arm. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So we have to clarify here. We're not just talking about any amount of tension. Yes, we have to have tension to sit up. We have to have tension to walk. But what we're really talking about here is excess tension. So when I say tension, I mean excess tension. And that's an important thing to think about because occasionally people will comment on the channel and say, well, tension isn't bad. Why are you acting like it's bad? Well, excess tension is bad. And usually if someone says tension, they're meaning excess tension. So tension is essentially, or excess tension is essentially using too much force to do something or using other muscles that are not really required, or something that is fundamental to the way we move is tension and release, okay? So I raise my arm to do something and then I lower my arm again and that muscle is able to release. So when muscles don't release, it builds tension, background tension that gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And as your muscles get tighter and they're not able to release, then we get symptoms of tension, which can be pain, it can be fatigue, among other things as well, okay? So we have to think about why tension is actually bad before we go on. Now, the next thing, let's talk about curling the fingers. So when I say curling the fingers, I'm not just talking about the excessive curling of the fingers, like sometimes you see, you know, the fifth finger really pulls up when we play certain things. B major scale where we don't use the fifth finger in the left hand, I find that that's a very common culprit, and the fifth finger pulls up like so. But I'm not just talking about excessive curling like that, I'm talking about any amount of curling, okay? So anytime the fingers are pulled in beyond this totally natural released state of the hand. And let's think about that for a second. So if I take my hand and I dangle it to the side and I just totally relax it, my hand looks like this. Now, this is natural, okay? So the fingers have a slight curve to them, meaning they're not being pulled straight or curled in like so, okay? So this is an important thing. We'll come back to that in a second. But as I turn my hand like this, notice that gravity pulls the hands, or the fingers rather, slightly more curved. As I go to the keyboard, that is my natural hand shape, okay? So the fingers are slightly curved, depending on if my hand's like this, or if my hand's like this, they look slightly more or less curved, but that's generally the shape. So anything past that, anything more than that, slight tipping in of the fingertips, etc., that is curling the fingers and it creates tension. The third thing we're going to talk about here is what physically happens when we curl the fingers, because I think this is helpful to think about. So in our arm, okay, and I'm actually going to step over to the whiteboard here. In our arm, we have muscles on the top of the arm here, okay, that pull the fingers straight, okay, like so. So if my hand's like this and I pull my fingers straight, that's a muscle on the top of my arm which pulls the fingers up. And then on the bottom or the back of my arm here, my hand, if I pull the fingers in, that's a muscle down here which pulls the fingers in like so. Okay, so we can obviously see if I'm playing the piano with my fingers like this, that's tense. Okay, I have tension or muscles that are pulling that and holding that constantly. But the same is true if I have my hand and my fingers are like this. If they're curled, that means that these muscles in the arm are constantly holding that shape. Now in the same way, if you think about holding the fingers like this, when we play, okay, so if I'm gonna play and my fingers are really straight, unless they're plain, you can just try that and see that's tense because all of these muscles are pulling my fingers up and holding them in that position. But the same is true if I do this, okay? If this hand shape is curled like that, or like, you know, if my fingers are curled, these muscles are constantly holding that shape. So if I try to play, you know, really fast, you'll see the fingers kind of move like this instead of just going straight up and down, etc. Okay? And that's a symptom of curling the fingers, so constantly activating these muscles, okay? The fourth thing, and this is really a principle, a big point that we really want to take home and apply to our practicing, is that curling the fingers will automatically cause tension in the forearm because it's these muscles in the forearm that are required to pull the fingers in. So this is a very common thing. Teacher says you need to curve your fingers, which results in curled fingers, okay? Now these muscles are activated and the forearm is kind of tight, and you can feel the forearm actually. Okay, now just relax everything, feel the forearm. It feels pliable, it feels supple. Now curl the fingers. It feels tight, okay? It feels really tight. So teachers say you need to curve those fingers. Those fingers aren't curved enough. And then they say, why are you so tense? You know, you're playing this Moskowski etude and you just can't handle it. You're just tensing up so much. Now you need to relax, okay? So that's not addressing the problem or understanding what the problem is. So what is the cure for this? What is the thing that we have to understand and then apply, okay? So usually teachers will say, okay, pretend like you're holding a ball in your hand or a piece of fruit. Now, I don't like saying this to students because think about it. If you're pretending that you're holding a ball, right, you don't relax the fingers and let them fall in that shape because you say hold a ball. Holding something is an active thing, right? It's an active thing that we have to do. So as soon as you say hold, people artificially pull the fingers in and hold that shape and everything is really tense, okay? So what I like to say is relax your fingers and notice it's more or less the same shape, but it's not tense. And when we play the piano, my hand is going to basically be in this shape, but I'm thinking a little bit more about the fingers being relaxed, released, okay? Then I'm thinking about holding that shape all the time, okay? Now, we have to think about that because notice that if my hand is relaxed, this knuckle joint is fairly prominent here, okay? So you can see those knuckles. My hand doesn't look like this, in other words. So if you're relaxing your hand and it looks kind of like, you know, like this with this joint, you know, really flat like that, that's not really relaxed. So sometimes you have to sort of retrain your hand to learn what true relaxation or a lack of excess tension actually is, okay? So as I play, if I'm not playing a finger, it's just relaxed, okay? Okay, so I can actually take this third finger and I can wiggle it around and it's just resting on the keyboard. And if you were here in the studio, you could see that this finger is activated, this finger is not, okay? So it truly is, right, a means of learning to have a relaxed, natural hand shape and not try to actively hold that shape. That produces curling, it activates these muscles, and it creates tension. And there will always be an underlying amount of tension. You know, this is a very common thing. You know, a student will say, you know, I'm practicing scales and I practice them every day. I'm not lazy, but I just can't break past that like 112 or 108 tempo, you know, 4 notes per click on the quarter note. And oftentimes it's a symptom of actively holding that hand shape, curling those fingers. There's a massive amount of tension here. And just try to move your fingers quickly when they're like that. It's very, very difficult. No amount of, you know, rotation when we practice, no amount of, you know, circular gesture or anything like that we talk about that are good ways to approach repertoire and play faster and more fluent, etc. No amount of those different things or concepts or arm weight, no amount of that is actually going to fix the problem because of that underlying amount of tension, because you're constantly activating those muscles. So I hope that that made sense. If you have any questions, make sure and put those down below. Always love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.